Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Tff Podcast and video with me, Andrew from Fantasy Football Hub, where you will find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof. Tonight, however, we are here to talk about everything Telegraph Fantasy Football. Luke Wilson is back. Luke, how have things been for you?
It's been total fantasy-wise. It's been pretty good recently. So I think we were laughing beforehand. I'm doing very well in Sky, particularly, pretty well in FPL. And one thing I put on is about a bit meh. I have. We'll come on to it when we get to my team. But I've dead-ended my main team, and I'm now picking up one of my other teams as my way in one because it's doing significantly better and it's got quite a few transfers left. So,
okay, cheers. And thanks for coming on again, Luke. Obviously, really appreciate it. And we also have back Carl Weeks at Darkest Jungle, our resident statistician for Fantasy Football Hub. Carl, I see you've recently been climbing the ranks.
Yes, I've stopped my slide down the league, as it were, around Christmas time, and I've slowly sort of built up. And have you in my sights, Andrew?
You have.
So I'm sure I've began losing a little bit of puff recently, so maybe I've run out of steam. But we'll sort of see if I can get a bit of energy to catch you near the end by the finishing line.
Yeah, and I'll be trying to climb out of your crosshairs, but we will see. So for this podcast, we're going to take a look at our teams, our progress and transfers left. We're going to look at some stats, including player ownership and form. There are some really interesting things which come out of that, actually. We're going to look at the fixtures and what they tell us over the coming few weeks. We will look at Carl's data and his algorithm and what that is telling us in terms of what we should be looking for the next few weeks. We will answer some community questions, and we will do our player picks for the month. So the 3 players of the next month who we think are the ones who are going to perform the best before we wrap up. So firstly then, Luke, if we can come on to your team, could you talk us through your current team and anything else you want to tell us about it, really?
Yeah, so I think I alluded to it a second ago. So I've picked up one of my alternative teams. I think this is a really good feature of the Telegraph. So unlike FPL, you can have multiple teams. So I entered 5. My main team, I think everybody's listened to the pod, has suffered a series of injuries with all my budget players I couldn't replace. So required a fair amount of major surgery, and then some of the sort of punts on that just didn't work, which happens because there's an element of luck in any fantasy game. But the beauty is I've picked up one of my other teams. So I'm currently sat in just about 8,700 with it. And before today, I used to 2 transfers today, but I've actually still got 11 transfers left, which nice. I think has me sat with quite a good run. So I think I've got ambitions to probably finish about top 2k with that, which it's not up where I've been in the past, but I think it's a credible finish if I can get there. In terms of where I'm going, so I had prior to the FA Cup game where miraculously both Mendy and Aguero started. I was quite surprised with that. Yeah. I had a team that was basically seven Liverpool players and some very cheap other players. And I think on the screen you can see that. So I've got Suinchu, Baldock, Traore and Cantwell. I'm more than happy with Cantwell, Baldock and Suinchu. I think they'll just stay for the season. I've got about 500,000 in the bank. So Traore will probably become Czar at some point when I get a tick 1. But what I'm now doing, which went pretty badly today after the United, the Manchester derby, but I moved in Ederson and Sterling when I saw them starting. I thought, hello, good stuff here, and Aguero starting. I already had Mendy. But I think Mendy, if you look at the recent stats, Mendy started almost all of them. I think he started 4 out of the last 5 games for City, and that's with Zinchenko being fit as well. I know Zinchenko started today, but he didn't do much. So I'm quite happy with that. And I think with the FA Cup draws, and I think with Liverpool potentially winning in the Merseyside derby, I think is now the game that it's on if City win midweek. What I'll probably end up doing is have a team that is majority Man City now rather than Liverpool, and I've got to take a few chances. I don't think I can really justify dropping TAA or Salah or Mane, so I'll keep one of the Liverpool big boys, keep TAA, and then I'll probably bring in KDB for Mane or Salah, whichever one goes, and then Traore can get a bit of an upgrade depending on which way I go on that move. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with where I am now. It's respectable, which is, if I look at I think it's languishing about 30-something K now, which is terrible. So firmly in the bin. Got enough transfers to go for a monthly prize, which is what I'm going to be doing.
Okay. Thanks for that, Luke. So moving on to Carl's team then. Carl, for our audio listeners, could you just run through the team, obviously, and then give us your thoughts on where you are and what your plans are?
Sure. Well, my current team, as it sort of stands now, is the one on the screen. In goal, I've got Henderson from Sheffield United. I've got 3 Leicester defenders in Bruyne Er, Soyuncu and Chilwell. And TAA makes up my 4th defender. In midfield, I've got Mount, Bruno, Salah and Sterling. And up front, I've got Aguero and Pukki. In terms of my team, as I sort of mentioned before, I had sort of slipped down to around 27,000, and I've sort of like slowly made ground up to about 5,000 just before the weekend. And I thought I was in pretty good shape in terms of the number of transfers, but I've sort of like made a bit of a mess of the last couple of weeks about reacting just because a player wasn't in the squad because I've heard that there's injured, and made a few rash transfers. So I had Gomez and I took him out and I put Robinson. And then, of course, Gomez plays the following game, and then I've transferred Robinson out today for Sterling. My other transfer I've made recently is Henderson, and that's only because Alisson has become injured. So I didn't actually, even though I want Henderson in goal in the longer term, it was a bit forced on me because I didn't want to do it for another 2 or 3 weeks. And in terms of Man City, I was quite happy to sort of hold off. It's a shame they've got a double game week this week, which has sort of like forced my hand a little bit. Yeah. I really wanted to bring in Kevin De Bruyne and Mahrez, but because they weren't playing today, I decided to bring in Aguero and Sterling. And it's a toss-up. I'm sure we'll sort of cover it a little bit later on, but I wasn't even sure if it's a wise move bringing in Man City players at this stage. But hey, you can't miss a double game week, and especially like the 2 premium ones. So we'll sort of see, and in the longer term, we'll sort of talk about some of my plans. I'm not as wedded to Man City. I think Man City are a great team to go for, but I also think Man United, their fixture list actually turns really, really good. So I'll be populating my teams with both Manchester teams. But this will happen after the next FA Cup round. Yeah. So that's a little overview of my team. What about yours, Andrew?
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, so I'm doing better in TFF than I am doing in any of the other games, as I generally do. I don't really know why. I'm having a bit of a stinker in Sky and FPL this year, in particular. But my team at the moment, so I've got Henderson in goals. I've got Baldock, Alexander-Arnold, Pereira, and Soyuncu. I've had Robertson all the way through actually, but I took him out last weekend for some Man City players, which I'll touch on now. My midfield at the moment is De Bruyne, Mahrez, Salah, and Jota, and my strikers are Aguero and Jesus, or Jesus, however you're inclined. So I've got those really top heavy with Man City at the moment. I moved in 3 of those I think it was last Wednesday evening when we saw the lineup for the FA Cup game where they played Sheffield Wednesday, and they put out not far off their strongest team apart from De Bruyne, who was obviously injured at that time, but I brought in Mahrez, Aguero and Jesus. I think they gave me a grand total of 10 or 11 points or something, which is quite sad from that really. And obviously they had a 4-for-1 over Liverpool. So I took out Robertson and Mane on that night. Obviously Mane punished me on Saturday. Robertson, very, very surprisingly, was rested or injured, wherever he was. So that worked out well for me. But I was hopeful today against Man United that those 4, or at least 3 of them may get some points. They've obviously got Arsenal this coming Wednesday, and they've got Burnley next weekend before Liverpool play again. So my kind of plan was to really to try and attack the fixtures, attack that 4-for-1. I did it very successfully last year, so I jumped on Man City a couple of times last year when they had this. And because Man City score so many goals, you tend to find that, when they score 4, 5, 6, you tend to find that all the attacking players are involved. You've obviously got the goal and the assist, but you've also got the second Casey, which is obviously, exclusive to TFF. So, you'd find, Mahrez would pass to De Bruyne, who would cross it for Aguero, and that goal alone is worth like 11 points for one goal. So that was my plan. Didn't really work out last week. Obviously Aguero scored, but that was it. Didn't work out today at all, especially since only Aguero out of the 4 actually started. But I am hopeful for the Arsenal and Burnley game before I reassess a little bit. Brought in Jota yesterday for Greenwood, so I had put in Greenwood, who actually did really, really well for me. I think he got 2 or 3 goals, a KC, but for his price, and to get that really awkward second striker at times for the 5-3-2, he worked out really well. But I did move him on for Jota yesterday. Disappointed, obviously, that Jota blanked against Brighton. But moving forward, similar to your thinking, Carl, actually, I'm sure I'll mention it now, and I'll run through the Man United fixtures as well. But I'm looking at Bruno Fernandez. Obviously, he seems to be involved in everything they do. I think I want to say 4.1 or 4.5 million, I think. So he's a really good price actually for a piece of that United attack. Martial, who is down as a midfielder, so he's 4.8 million as well. So I think he's potentially a really good option. And we'll touch on the defensive assets in a bit when we come to our stats. But it's a really interesting stats about the Man United defence as well. But just to briefly run through their fixtures. So this coming weekend they're away to Tottenham, then they have their FA Cup game. After that they finish up the season with Brighton, Bournemouth, Villa, Southampton, Crystal Palace, West Ham, and then they finish up with Leicester then. So that run of 8 or 9 games look really, really nice, and they're still in the FA Cup as well. So and they've got they are in the Europa, but they've got, is it LASK or LASK or something? I've never heard of them, I've got to be honest. But you would think that they would get through that reasonably comfortably. So similar to you, Carl, I think in terms of Man United, I'm very keen on their assets. Still keen on Man City. Okay, they're off form at the moment, but I still think they will score goals. And I may look to get Mane back or maybe Robertson, but my problem is I'm down to 5 transfers. I've made a fair few transfers. I tend to try and attack the transfers kind of month on month. So I had a bit of a mini overhaul about 5 weeks ago where I went down from 14 to 9, and this week I've gone down from 9 to 5 for this set of this set of fixtures. And I'll probably likely make a couple more over the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then two for the running. I don't tend to end the season with many transfers left, but everyone plays it differently. So that's my team at the moment. Obviously, in terms of the FA Cup, I know, Luke, you're a big, you're in terms of the way you play, you tend to look at the FA Cup doing as a real source of points towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think when you get where we are now, and I'm not sure if you've got a view of the fixtures for the FA Cup, but I can talk through them in a second. But I think we're now at the business end, and I know for those who've listened regularly, I think me and Carl had an interesting debate where I was just like, my view was, well, I'm just going to ignore the FA Cup until it gets to about the quarter-final time. I'm actually really interested in it now. And I think that was borne out. If you look at the previous round where Man City put a lot of good players out against, on paper, a team that's not quite as good as them. I've been quite polite there. And I think if I'm looking at the fixtures now, on paper, and assuming everybody puts their key teams out, you've got one difficult game and you've got 3 teams that are almost certainly going to go through. And I'm not trying to be disparaging about certain clubs, but I'm looking at, and I think all 4 of the away teams will probably go through. The Leicester-Chelsea one's, a bit closer, but Leicester are out of form. And if you look, anybody watched that Chelsea game today, I mean, they looked a different team. And it's quite interesting with Giroud playing. I mean, that's one that I guess nobody's got in their teams. He's probably less than 1% owned at the moment, but he's certainly somebody I'm looking at. But Man City away to Newcastle. I mean, Newcastle always get steamrolled by the big clubs, in my view. You've got Norwich versus Man United. I mean, Norwich were lucky to get through against Spurs. I mean, I really wanted Spurs to go through for Sky reasons and FPL reasons, but Man United seemed to want it, and I think the full strength Man United team against Norwich, that's probably unlikely Norwich will win that. Sorry, Norwich fans. And then I think the Sheffield United versus Arsenal, and Arsenal under Arteta have turned a corner as well. Yeah. And I think Sheffield United, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. So there's quite a lot of debate going on in some of the WhatsApp groups I'm on around Sheffield United. So I'm on the side that I think they've outperformed. Don't get me wrong, I think they've been brilliant, and I think their whole team have been great this season. So, they deserve to be where they are. But we're at the business end of the season, and a lot of teams will now have figured them out, and a lot of teams will be turning up, knowing what they're up against, and will be trying harder. So we're at the business end, and I think Sheffield United, if they drop a few places, I don't think realistically they're going to get Europe. So when are they going to go on the beach? Will they go on the beach? I don't know. So I am a betting man, and I'd have a decent four-way bet on Chelsea, Man City, Man United, and Arsenal being the ones that get to the semi-final. And then if you get through to that, I mean, to be honest, I would probably pick the Manchester club. So Carl and I, and all three of us have talked about the Man City and Man United runs, but that is why I'm looking at Man City. I'm less keen on Man City because of the rotation, but the Man United ones as well. I mean, they've got good fixtures coming up, so if you can get on the right players from both of those teams, I think you can really fly. And I'm going to be prioritising my transfers on those two. I'm going to probably take a bit of a punt. I might, but Mount looked really good today. He may have got injured today. I didn't see why he got subbed. I didn't think it was because of an injury, but he may have got injured today. So I may look at that. But they've got that harder game against Leicester, so it's kind of, I'm less wanting to do that. So it's quite interesting there. And then when you get to the league, I think you talked about some of the league fixtures. And, right now, Leicester have got 2-1 in the league over most teams, as to Man City. So if you are flush with transfers, I would strongly advocate getting someone like Bruyne Er, or maybe getting Vardy. Nobody up the top I would have thought would have Vardy right now because of his form. So I probably am going to be jumping on Vardy. I'll probably go Salah to Vardy for a couple of games and then bring him back for that Everton derby. But I've got the transfers. So it's going to be, I think there's some good opportunity, and then you do get that bonus game in the FA Cup that the others won't get. And particularly with Man United, you've got that great fixture run in the league, and they are going to be really wanting to go for Europe. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting one, I think. So, don't know if that answers the question. I feel like I've gone off on a right.
No, you're fine. You've moved on to the fixture planning, which we were going to talk about in a minute or two. So when we come to that, you can rewind and go on to that now. So just to finish up on my team then, I was 2,400 going into the weekend. I've dropped a bit to 3,300. I'm disappointed with, since I had those 4 Man City players. But I'm as I say, I'm hoping now that these Man City, these 2 extra games they have over Liverpool, I get a few points and really boost me up into the top, maybe even the top 1 to 2,000 if Man City can do a bit of a madness on either Arsenal or Burnley, maybe Arsenal and Burnley, but we will see. Okay, so next we were just gonna take a look at some of the stats off the TFF site. There's some really interesting stats. So this first one we're looking at player ownership. I think it's always good to look at this ownership because there tends to be a few surprises on players who are a lot more low owned than we kind of thought. So top of the shop, Trent Alexander-Arnold, 4.5 million, 51%. If you haven't got TAA at 4.5 million, what are you doing? He is just the most wonderful player, involved in everything. He's got the most points. He's 15 points clear of anyone else in the whole game, and he's only 4.5 million. So he is the one to have. Kevin De Bruyne is next with 41%. He's also the second highest point scorer as well, 152 points. So Alexander-Arnold and Kevin De Bruyne are probably the cornerstone of a lot of teams, I would guess. The only thing with De Bruyne, which would, maybe urge a bit of caution in terms of getting him in. So I've got him in my team. He won't be going, but Pep did indicate today during one of his press conferences that he will be prioritising the Champions League and the FA Cup. So obviously it's good for TFF that we have the FA Cup, but just bear that in mind, that he may not play in the league as much, especially if Man City get past Madrid and into the next round then of the Champions League. Just something to look out for. Salah's in 37% of teams. Aguero is in 33% of teams. Mane is in 31% of teams. Sterling 28%, still very high ownership of Sterling actually. Seems that he's fallen off a cliff a bit since Christmas. Chilwell 27%, Soyuncu 25%, Vardy 23%, and Robertson 23%. So they're the kind of status of ownership. And in terms of points scored there, actually, they're not far off a parallel between percentage owned and points scored, but they tend to be from the bigger clubs. They're from Liverpool, they're from Man City, and obviously everyone jumped on the Leicester boys during November and December when they were doing really, really well. A lot of people are still on those for the value that they bring. And then we just look at the stats of the form. So this is for the last 6 weeks, and this was one that really I found really interesting. So Salah has scored the most points in the last 6 weeks. He scored 44 points, but second and third were Harry Maguire and Luke Shaw, which really surprised me when I pulled up this stat. So they've both scored 43 points each in the last 6 weeks in TFF. You've then got Son Heung-min. Apparently he had one kind of massive haul which made up for a lot of the 41 points he scored. Matt Doherty has re-emerged, so he's only 3.5 million. He seems to have found his form of last season. I had him in for a lot of last season. He was one of the reasons why I had a really good season last season. Jumped on early. He used to score goals in the FA Cup all the time last year, but he's an incredible fancy asset. Even this weekend, if you brought him in this weekend, he only got a clean sheet, whereas obviously in the last few games he's been having goals and assists and God knows what. So wonderful player to have in. Alexander-Arnold is there as well. Ricardo Pereira, Dele Alli surprisingly as well. So he's still in and around there, Alex. Even though Spurs have been absolutely horrible, he still is scoring points. He does get involved. And he did take the penalty on the weekend as well, which was interesting with their games upcoming. So maybe he is one to keep an eye on potentially. Dominic Calvert-Lewin at 4.9 million has scored 34 points in his last 5 games, and Dean Henderson. So Carl, you brought in the right man there. So I brought in Henderson for Sheffield United. I think it was their 3rd round FA Cup game, and like I say, he keeps a clean sheet, and then he doesn't. But for 3 million, that's all you want really. So, but it was those United defenders chaps that really jumped out on me there. Were you expecting that in terms of the stats, in terms of the points scored, or not? Luke, were you expecting that?
Not well. I was aware of it. I mean, I've been reserving judgment up until today's game, but I've watched most of the second half, and they actually looked pretty good. Like, they were really, really well drilled. I mean, it's like they're a different team since Bruno Fernandez has come on. I mean, I was listening to the radio this morning, and they were just talking about players that come into clubs and then give them a massive lift. And I mean, what some of the pros on the show I was listening to were talking about is that they reckon he's given that club a maybe 10 or 20% lift on every player just by going into training and just being that much better. Yeah. I mean, it'd be really interesting how Pogba, I mean, if he ever is fit again, because I mean, it sounds like he's back every week, but he never seems to turn up. But it'd be quite interesting how, I mean, I think that's the end of him. I'm going off on a tangent here, but it'd be what I really want to see is how he will react if he is fit and comes back before the end of the season, because there's no way he's the main man there anymore. With what Fernandez has done. I mean, he's come in from Portugal, which arguably is a lower standard, but I mean, he's bossing it, and he's, again today, the delivery on that goal for Martial was brilliant. I mean, I don't know what Edison was doing, but I mean, it's crazy, and that just goes all the way back. If the best form of defence is your attack, and they're all looking sharp. Dan James is looking an option again. I think he's 3 mil in this game, and Martial looks like an option. I mean, the whole team are there, but particularly, they've got a solid back line, and sort of Shaw sort of is that central defender. He's that third central defender when they're playing three at the back with Williams as the wing back, and so he's alternating. So I like them now, and with their fixture run, and if they're going for the Champions League, and last thing on this. I mean, I think it's now 9 or 10 games now without defeat, which, 10. Give him a knighthood now, Ollie. Yeah, the wholesale team. I mean, what's your view, Carl?
Very similar to yourself. I was half expecting Luke Shaw to be up there because he scored and had an assist during midweek. And I heard somewhere else that Man U have had one of the better defences at the moment. So their defence, seems solid. And yes, Bruno comes in, he's given them a lift. So I do take with a pinch of salt sometimes all the murmurings that come out, because there's so much just hot air trying to boost everything up. But there has definitely been an uplift in the results and morale, if nothing else. Whether they would hit a rocky patch or not, we don't know. But at this moment in time, their fixtures, I was waiting till after they got the Spurs out of the way, because it's easy running. They've got stuff to play for. So Shaw, Maguire, I've already got Bruno, and they're fairly priced. So I think a very good option going forward.
I particularly like the look of Maguire. So he's actually got 112 points this season at 3.7 million, and when you consider that Salah, right, he's scored 148 points. When you look at players like Doherty, 130, even Alexander-Arnold, 167, Pereira, 134, Dele Alli, 111, Dean Henderson, 112. If you think that, if we were to look objectively just across the season at Man United, they've had an absolute howler. And Maguire has missed a few games, an injury as well, but I think with his attacking threat, he also makes those kind of marauding runs at times. He can play the ball over the top, so he does get involved in some goals at times. And as we say, their fixtures, they're still in the FA Cup. I'm definitely looking at a Maguire, Fernandez, Martial. Maybe not all three, because Martial's injury record is just horrendous. I'm sure I saw a stat this week that he's not started more than 3 games on the trot in 3 years. I may have exaggerated that last bit. There's definitely a stat where he hasn't started more than 3 games in a long period of time. But Fernandez, Martial, and Maguire for me are looking really, really good options for the running at a really good price. So that's what the stats are telling us then. So what we're just going to do now, we're going to flick to the Tff Transfer Planner, and that is available free on Fantasy Football Hub. And Luke, so you did start to talk about this earlier, and the first thing I can note immediately was Leicester's games. So they got that Villa and Watford. They got a 2-0 over the majority of the league this weekend. So would you like to start from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for those who are flush, so I'm not advocating Leicester long term, but they've got Villa next. And I'm very scared, particularly in Sky where I'm doing all right. I'm very, very scared for not owning Vardy. Now, I know Vardy's had his injury problems, but even if Vardy's out, you've got a few there that could do well. I mean, Perez can come in, Iheanacho. I mean, his goal the other night, which got ruled off. I mean, I still don't understand why that was ruled off by VAR, but I mean, his goal was brilliantly well taken. And they're going up against effectively the worst defence in the league. So, I mean, I think that could be a real option, jumping on that and getting a couple of 2-for-1s. So there's a few people that you can do that for. So your Wolves one. So I would imagine there's probably quite a few people with Jimenez, given their recent form. You've also got Jota. I think Jota's a bit lower price. I think he's in the 3 mils, but there are options there. I mean, a lot of people seem to be bigging up Harvey Barnes. I mean, I think he's a very good footballer, but I still don't see the end product. So personally, I'd swerve him. Ricardo Pereira, I mean, he scored in the Cup the other day. So he's someone I think is a great option. So I mean, if we get the beauty, we get to see the team sheet tomorrow night. But I mean, if Vardy starts, I think that's a great shout. I think if you're not there, if you haven't got Pereira, I mean, he's a great option as well. Johnny Evans, another good one. He's got a goal threat. I mean, James Maddison, God, I mean, I've owned him in FPL I've finally got rid of him, but I've owned him for about 6 weeks with no return at all. Yeah. Eye test wise, he looks brilliant. So I mean, I think there's a number of decent Leicester options, but only do it if you've got more than 10 transfers. Think about it. If not, don't go there. And then the Man City one. I mean, I think really you might have missed the boat a bit because the FA Cup one was the time to jump on and get a 4-for-1, or wait for the Liverpool game and go today. But saying that, we know some of them aren't there. I mean, again, I think if KDB's on the team sheet, I would still advocate going from potentially Mane or Salah or BBD or Robbo or someone like that to him. So those are ones I'm immediately eyeing up. I mean, I think there's a few coming up in the future. I'm going off memory here, but I think you've got a couple of clubs like West Ham that have Friday fixtures. Spurs West Ham is one of the Friday fixtures coming up, so there's an option there. I think Spurs play Man United, but I'm not with the upfront injury concerns and Mourinho's 5 central defender tactics. I'm probably not advocating Spurs, but I mean, I think somebody like Fabianski could be an option. Not that West Ham really keep clean sheets, but there are. I mean, and saying that, actually, West Ham look pretty good offensively, and the lad Bowen, I don't know what price he is, but I'd be shocked if he's not starting with a 2-0. So he's a potential option as well. So you could probably get a couple of games out of them. But I mean, I think that the main ones I've already talked about. So I mean, the immediate ones would be looking for your Liverpool and Wolves players going to either Man City or Leicester. I think you've still got options there because you can get 2-0. So if you see the team sheet, Leicester safer. We pretty much all know the team if they're all fit. So Leicester's probably where I would go for a 2-0. But I don't know. What about you guys? You got any thoughts on the next few weeks?
The only thoughts I've immediately got is I think the FA Cup games. So just for those who are watching on the screen, all the FA Cup games on the 21st of March, they've yet to be decided at what time and days they're going to fall. So at the moment they're still on the website. As the 3 p.m. on a Saturday, I would guess there's going to be an early game, mid game, a late game, probably game on the Sunday. But I think that could potentially have a knock-on effect on the plans we make. Just for example, so at the moment the Man City Newcastle game is down as 3:00 on the Saturday, with Liverpool Crystal Palace, the Premier League game, being as the 5:30 game on the same day. So if that game stays there, I would be much more tempted to hold on to my Man City players, for example, rather than if they move that game to the Sunday, that means Liverpool has that extra game before Man City again. So I think a bit of a key for me here, especially when thinking about Man United and Man City, which we've obviously talked a lot about already, is waiting for confirmation of when those of the days and times of those games. I do think they have quite a big knock-on effect. And the other team I've been eyeing up is Wolves. So Wolves, they play next Sunday. They play West Ham at 2:00. So it's after the majority of a lot of the games have been played that weekend. After that, then they have a blank, and then they have Aston Villa then on that 4th of April. So Wolves for me, just in terms of their players, the way they're playing, I'm not sure. Yesterday was a bit of a one-off, but up until then, players like Doherty 3.5, Jota, I brought him in yesterday 3.8. Jimenez, I believe, is 5.4. I know they're not in the FA Cup, but they look the real deal.
But just to jump in, we're talking. But a switch from to Leicester now and then on back onto the Wolves, because they're similarly priced. All of their assets are in the same ballpark. So Vardy's at 6, and so if you actually, and Doherty's got 3.5, and there's a lot of the Leicester boys are around the 3 mil mark. So I think you could, if you had those two and you were willing to use forward transfers, I think you could jump on Leicester now and then jump back onto the Wolves guys. Obviously want to see if Leicester could go through in the FA Cup, but I think there's if you want to make ground, there's some. I think that's where I would be focusing on, probably on those teams.
I've just realised as well, because I realised I made a mistake on here, because I was looking at Wolves and thinking they were good, but then I thought they blanked. They don't. They've actually got Bournemouth in this game week of the 21st of March. So many apologies. I will update that. But if we look at that with fresh eyes, they've actually got West Ham, Bournemouth, Villa, then they've got Arsenal, Sheffield United, Everton, Burnley, Palace and Chelsea. So their fixtures to the end of the season are really, really nice. They have got Europe, is the only thing I would say. They have got Olympiacos home and away over the next week and a half as well. But those next 3 games, they actually have a 3-for-1 over a lot of teams, because they play on the Sunday, then they play on the weekend, and then they the 12:30 game on the following weekend. They do have a 3-for-1 over a lot of teams. So if you are going to bring in Wolves, that's the time to bring them in. Apologies for that error there in the planner. I will obviously update that. Apologies, Cal, I jumped over you then. What are your immediate thoughts?
Yeah, so well, for me, I have to sort of sit on my hands because I haven't got that many transfers left.
Same, yeah.
And I know I've got 9, which is sort of like maybe a lot more than most people. And therefore, for me, I see the biggest thing of thinking, how can I get extra games? And 3-for-1 sounds very good, or assuming you can get 3-for-1, but you're really using up 2 transfers. So you're not really getting like loads of extra games. Whereas I'm sort of thinking, how can I use my transfers to get the most actual games for each individual transfer? And therefore, like, Wolves are a good team. They may have good fixtures, but they only have 8 games. Mm-hmm. That's one reason I get quite interested in the teams in the Cup, not because they're in the Cup, but because they get an extra fixture. And I know that when they get that double game week, quite often they rest players, but it's getting those extra fixtures. And one of the best teams I think to switch to in the right moment will be Sheffield United. Not because Luke may be right that they may sort of fall away a little bit, but they've got 2 extra games that they need to play because they've already had a blank in the League Cup. They were blank again in the FA Cup because they've got a cup game itself, and they're likely to play their cup games. So whether they beat Arsenal or not, so it's like, how do you get an extra game of a team playing before the Sheffield United in a weekend, plus you get their 2 double game weeks? And I think that's so much.
It's probably just
huger.
I was just going to jump in there. Sorry to interrupt, Carl, but the particularly with Baldock and Stevens, they're so nicely priced in this game as well. And I would argue they're probably their 2 most defensive players, even though they're down as defenders, just with the way Sheffield United play. I mean, they go for 1-0 is what they're aiming for. Certainly that's the impression I get. I don't watch them week in, week out, but those guys are consistently returning assists and goals, and at a good rate, and they're so cheap. So they don't need to be the best form if you've got defenders, because they get that extra, get the extra points for the goals that they would, the forwards and that don't get as well. So, extra games and decent players. So I'm not advocating steering clear of everybody. I still think Baldock and Stevens is where I would be going for that team, particularly like you say, if they go through in the Cup, they could have probably 4 more fixtures than everybody else. Yeah,
I just picked up with Stevens. He did. He had a knock on Saturday, didn't he? I think he came off injured, but in general, Sheffield United defenders and Henderson look a really good investment there. So I think between us looking at the fixtures for the next kind of month or so, I think we need to keep an eye on those FA Cup games and when they fall. But between a lot of us, it sounds like Luke is potentially keen on looking a bit of Leicester and then maybe jumping off. I'm keen on I'm keen on Wolves. Carl is keen on Sheffield United, but I think we're all keen on Man United and Man City. I think they're the ones. What are your thoughts on Liverpool, guys? Because we had a question which we'll move on to later. There's if you look at the ownership of Liverpool players, I think there was four of the highest owned players still Liverpool players. What are our thoughts at the moment on those? Should we be looking to move them on for Man City, Man United? Go on, Carl.
Yeah, personally, at some stage, yes, and that's more when I know when the double game weeks are and all that sort of stuff. I think Liverpool got a fair run of fixtures at the moment, and then they sort of like turn a little bit more tricky later on. I may mention it a little bit later. My plan is that I'm going to get rid of all my players, of Liverpool players, at the right point in time, and it's really the question of when should that be. Depending on rearranged games, at my moment in time, I think it's when they play home to Burnley. It's a 12:30 game, and it's after the next set of fixtures. And I think because they'll play that's a good fixture. Yeah. You'll know which teams have progressed in the cup, and then it's like goodbye Liverpool, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, that's really good. Thanks for that, gents. Really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Liverpool's one. There's a lot of debate going on with Liverpool, particularly on Twitter at the moment, and I'm not sure because they've still got records to go with, and I quite like the fact that they're there. I mean, I was thinking about. I mean, I've been thinking about this over the last few weeks. That what would I rather have people with lots of fixtures, but not so much form, or would I rather have just, the fact that Salah and Mane, in my opinion, if you take away KDB, are the best two players in the league, like hands down. You could probably chuck Trent in there as well. And I mean, going into FPL this week, there was something nagging me because I brought in Aubameyang there for the double game week, and it seems a no-brainer because we're playing West Ham and Man City, which aren't particularly tight. And then both of them have scored, and they've got considerably more points. And I'd be far happier if I was sat with my captain on one of those two in that format this week than I would with Aubameyang playing at City. And so there is this. I mean, hands down, those two will be the top scoring players. In terms of goals, Trent will be the highest assister other than KDB. And I guess there's a sort of counter argument. Even though the record's gone for the unbeaten, they are still on for record points. So I mean, like Carl, I absolutely want to watch, but I'm not sure I will be able to bring myself to get rid of Salah particularly, and probably Trent. I think those two will be there till the end. And I think the FA Cup is like it was last season. I think the FA Cup final is the week before the end of the Premiership again. I need to double check that. But if that's the case, I'll probably keep the Liverpool boys because, the last day of the season madness. I'd rather have the best two players in the game on the last day of the season where people are scoring 8s and 7s and things like that. But I completely get where Carl's coming from because the seasons I've done best is where I've taken a bit of a risk and just ploughed into those teams that have, got to the FA Cup final and backed one team over the other. So I don't know where I'll go yet, but I'm particularly, from those that listen to the pod, I'd be very interested because this is a debate I want to keep having because I'm not sure what I'm going to do in multiple formats actually.
Okay.
Well, for me, just come back, Luke. I'm not sort of suggesting that I'm moving away from Liverpool based on their form. So even if their form was consistent, and because to me it's a blip, you lose to Watford, and they may have looked a bit shaky against Bournemouth and Atletico Madrid. I just think of that as random noise. So I'm just looking at them as the same perspective. I just think that when you've got the chance to jump off them, and I'm not quite sure how many games they've got after if it is the Burnley game, they may only have 4 games, and other teams will have 7, and they may be fantastic footballers, and they may score 8 goals each, but I still expect the other teams to score more because they have twice as many games, and that's why I'll be looking to move off rather than I a loss of confidence in their ability.
Just to touch on
where's your head at, Andrew?
So I've left myself purposely with Salah and Mane. So I had Salah and Trent. So I had Robertson and TA. I had them all season, I think, and I also had Mane, Salah, and Firmino for their massive run of games that they had through February, and and that did me well. So I jumped from 7 or 8k up to 2 or 3 where I am now, and now I see that with Man City, I'm not going to be getting rid of Trent. I just think for his price at 4.5, I think regardless, he's the biggest point scorer in the game. I think he's that for a reason, but I think with his price, I think Salah is potentially a bit more dispensable, because at 7 million, I'm not a massive fan of having these really expensive players unless they're for a specific stretch of games. It's very rare that you actually get the value out of them. If you look at players like Doherty now, right, at 3.5 compared to Salah is exactly half the price. Imagine what you could do with that 3.5 million. Ploughed.
Well, Bruno 4.5, isn't it? That's
Exactly.
That's a big chunk of change. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm not going to move off Salah yet, I don't think, because Liverpool do have a small congestion of fixtures soon. So they got that Everton on that Monday night. They then got Crystal Palace then on the late game on the Saturday on the 21st of March, before they play Man City, which is going to be an incredible game. And there's no way they'll be resting players against Man City. And the way Man City defend, you can see Liverpool putting a few past there. But when I see these stretch of games, I won't get rid of Trent because of his price, but I will certainly be looking to get rid of Salah. Just to touch on Carl's point there, actually, that Brighton game there, the Burnley game, Carl, you're talking about for Liverpool. After that, they've only got 3 games left, Liverpool, and they are against Arsenal, Chelsea, and Newcastle as well. Though I do think a lot depends on what happens in the Champions League and how far they get. Same for Man City, right? We're talking about all these plans now. If it's looking likely Liverpool may go out, which means the only thing they've got left to play is the league. You've got the thing then of whether they try and break all these records, or actually do they try and give some of their squad members Premier League medals, because they have to play, was it a minimum of 5 or 6 games to get a medal, and there's all these kind of things to think about. And the same with Man City. So they've got the advantage against Madrid, so it's reasonably likely that they'll go through against Madrid, which means that their games will then clash later on with some of the other games. But saying that, it looks like he's going all out for the FA Cup as well now. So there's a lot of permutations still. We were spoilt last year. I think I mentioned this before. We were spoilt last year because there was 1 point between Man City and Liverpool for the final third of the season. They played their strongest 11s every single game, and that went all the way through to game week 38, the final game of the season. It's just not going to be the case this year, as we've seen this afternoon, and as we may see over the next month. So I think it's just a case of I think my advice on transfers over the next few weeks is probably not to do what Carl has done over the last week, is try and hop off the players you mentioned earlier, Gomez, kind of Robertson. I'd save the transfers. I'd save the transfers back. So if on Wednesday now, so I've got 4 Man City, right? If none of them start, I'm not going to transfer them out because they've got Burnley on the weekend. I won't be moving to another 4 because odds are, they may not play on the next game, and we're hitting a period of the season now where I've got 5 transfers left. I think Carl, you've got 9, Luke, you've got 11. Almost every transfer I think now we should be looking at as not far off a season-long move, especially mine. Maybe not as much for you guys, but I'm looking at Man United players now, not for a particular run of games, it's for the rest of the season. I won't be taking them out because I can't. Same for Man City, maybe. Same for Wolves potentially with their fixtures as well. But so I'm going off on a tangent now. But I think, that's my thoughts on Liverpool. I think Trent is indispensable. I think the rest are dispensable, but at the right time. Does anything ring true there, guys, or do you think I'm talking out of my backside?
No.
So, I thought that you both weren't saying anything because you were both like, what is he going on about? But yeah, okay. We will.
Do you feel better?
I do. I do now that you both eventually nodded after about 10 seconds. But yeah, I was a bit there, and I both were thinking, oh my god, what is he talking about? But anyway, okay. We'll head back to the main pod soon then, guys. And what we'll do now, we will ask Carl. So Carl has done some analysis. He's obviously got his algorithm. If you haven't seen his algorithm on Fantasy Football Hub, it is an absolute work of art. And this is for TFF, Sky and FPL. So if you haven't seen it, please go and see it on Fantasy Football Hub. But Carl, would you like to talk us through the next few parts which are all around data and your algorithm?
Sure. Okay. So hopefully on the screen now is my usual slide that I've been producing, which sort of talks about expected goals. Yep. So I've got in a blue bar the expected for each team what the algorithm produces. The blue bar is what we expect them to score or what the algorithm produces over the year. Yep. The green bar is what we think over the next 4 game weeks, and the red bar is for the remainder of the season. And for the remainder of the season, for each team, I've divided it by 8 rather than how many games they've got. And this is partly so it's easier to identify teams that have got extra matches and therefore we'd expect them to see extra goals. So the first thing that I sort of like note when I first sort of like looked at this chart was you've got teams at the very right-hand side, which is Southampton, Everton and Villa, which have very low green bars over the next 4 matches. And this is because they've got they don't play in they actually blank in the FA Cup weekend, so they've got no league fixtures or no FA Cup fixtures. And as you can then imagine, which has a slight double-edged sword. So I wouldn't like to be holding any of these players, but because they've got blanks, it will mean that they'll have double game weeks later on in the year. So if you do need an enabler, they may be decent teams to look at because you're going to get an extra fixture if you sort of like transfer them in after the FA Cup weekend. Yeah. The 2 interesting ones that sort of struck to me, and we sort of like touched on this already, is like Man City and Man United. So they've both got quite lowish green bars. So in the next 4 fixtures, they're not the easiest fixtures compared to what you'd expect over the season, but their red bars are higher than their seasonal average. So this sort of tends to indicate that there'll be a fixture change. So those will be a couple of teams that I would look at. And naturally, you can sort of see any of the other teams yourselves then and sort of see what the fixture list looks like. Then if we move to the slide after, I picked out some of what I'd call the top teams. So this is where I'd look at. So I've got Liverpool next fixture from game week 30 to the end of the season, and the top 5 sides. So I've got some Liverpool players, and I'd imagine quite a few people have, and they've got a couple of tough fixtures now, but they've got some what I'd call relatively easy games: Aston Villa, Brighton, and Burnley. So it'd be quite nice to sort of like squeeze those in, and then, as Andrew's already mentioned earlier, they've got in their running, they're away at Arsenal, away at Newcastle, and home to Chelsea. I wouldn't sort of call those the easiest fixtures, and if they're quite hard, I'd quite like to get off them, especially if they've got no additional gains. In yellow is the FA Cup fixtures themselves, so game week 31 and game week 34. One thing that put me off Man City is, or getting them in at the moment, is game week. If we look at game week 34, so they're playing Man City. They're meant to be playing Newcastle in the Cup, and they're due to play them in the league. So if they actually get knocked out of the Cup away at Newcastle, and I know that Luke doesn't think this will be possible, but Newcastle did beat them the other season, so I wouldn't say it's any certainty. Then that would be a catastrophe if you've got too many Man City players because they'll have a blank game week and you're holding all these players when you could bring them in slightly later. So I'll be a bit more conservative. My plan was to wait until after the Liverpool game and then start thinking about the Man City having the fixture switch there.
Yeah.
And you can go across the list. Again, Chelsea haven't got a bad run in. I don't see many Reds there. That's it. They got Man City and Liverpool. So the Reds are like the top two, and Pinks are what I'd call top sides. And Man United, next week they're away at Spurs, and then it's only Leicester at the very final game. So any switching, I'd be thinking, okay, Norwich I don't think it's going to be an easy game. But if you wait for that FA Cup weekend, you know the results. I'd be looking to switch after game week 31, and that's when I'll be first. My first port of call is to switch from Leicester, because their fixtures toughen up a little bit, especially if they get knocked out of the cup, and I'll be switching those to Man United. Maybe it's a couple of Chelsea, and a little bit later on, after Man City have played Liverpool, I'd be switching that to Man City players more about game week 34. And like I sort of said, unless there's any hurry, because just say double game weeks get brought forward, I'm not quite sure when they'll be. But until news comes out like that, my plan will be as soon as that Burnley match is out the way, any Liverpool players, they'll be out the door, and it'll be going to Man City, Leicester, or Man United, or Chelsea. Probably not Leicester. So those are pretty good fixtures. And I've sort of put at the bottom of the chart there that it is the 12:30 kickoff against Burnley. So that just gives you an ideal lead-in to the other teams.
I love the way you visualize it, Carl. You know when you're trying to explain something, and then you visualize it like this, you can actually see, how all the dominoes, fall, and how everything, falls into place. It's really, really good stuff. For anyone who is listening on the audio, I would recommend that you jump onto YouTube and watch this, because it's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, and it applies across all the games as well. So, in Sky and in FPL, I will be dumping my Liverpool players gradually, and I'll be going heavy on Man United and Man City, and taking advantage of that. Now, I've grouped those together, because they've got the algorithm says they'll score well, and also because you'd imagine they're the most expensive players because they're the top clubs. So if we go to my next slide, I've also picked out a few of the lesser known clubs. Well, sorry, not lesser known, but lower down in the league, shall we sort of say, and teams that could be worthwhile having. So I've chosen Sheffield United, Aston Villa, Everton, Norwich, and Newcastle. None of them have got the most easiest of fixtures, but you can sort of see there, Everton, they've well, I suppose you don't get with an Everton that cheap, because they're probably quite expensive players.
Calvert-Lewin's only 4.9, mind. I think he's worth a look.
So when we sort of talk about moving some of your bigger players around, if you need someone like Calvert-Lewin, you could sort of get them in after the FA Cup, because they blank, and therefore you're going to get an extra fixture out of them, which is away at Norwich. But their last 4 or 5 games, home to Southampton, home to Aston Villa, home to Bournemouth, away to Wolves, Sheffield United and Norwich. Probably it's not the toughest. Norwich haven't got a bad run, but Sheffield United and Aston Villa are two teams that I would sort of like focus into. Sheffield United, that we've mentioned already, especially if they get through in the Cup. They've already got 2 double game weeks that they have to have. If they beat Arsenal, then that'll be 3 extra games. That'd be like, weight in gold on its own merits. Aston Villa, they'll have 2 games once they get through the FA Cup. So they blank. They don't have a game in game week 31 at this moment in time. But then after that, they play Wolves, and then they'll have 2 extra games. Problem is with Aston Villa, they do have some tricky fixtures. Away to Liverpool, away at Everton, home to Man United, home to Arsenal. But if it's an enabler, an extra 2 games, fantastic. I'll take that.
I suppose in terms of options there, you maybe, obviously Grealish stands out. I'm not even sure what else you go for, to be honest. Have you got any kind of Villa players in mind at all, guys, any of you?
Well, Grealish is the obvious one. I was hearing the other day about McGuinn coming back, so he was quite good at the beginning. And they've got their centre forward. I don't know what he's like.
Samatta, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it. I'd go for them, but you've got a few more weeks, and it's like you can still weigh up your option. For me, that's when I'll start weighing up my options about honing down on certain players, because I'm just going to sit on my hands for the time being. Have you got any views?
No, I think, it's very comprehensive going through that. I think Villa, I'm not advocating this, but, if you need to find the budget, they've got a £2 million playing defender. Not that he's going to keep any clean sheets anytime soon, I don't think. Might get one, but, if you really feel like you're desperate and you've got two big hitters that you want to bring in, then there is that if you really want to go that way. But then my mate Dan Burns down there as well. I'd far rather go with him than I think it's Gilbert, isn't it? The $2 million. But it's interesting.
Just to say that Grealish is $3.5 million, and Luke, I'm going to disappoint you here because Bowen for West Ham is 3.7. I can't believe that. That's a really disappointing.
Are you kidding me?
No.
God!
I can't believe that price.
How much is Antonio? Antonio would go Antonio then, because he's about the same price, isn't he? So
Antonio, looking a bit, but
I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any value in West Ham. There's no extra games that you get from them, because they're at the Cup. They haven't blanked already this year. They play in. They aren't blanking during the FA Cup weeks, and therefore, give me an extra 2 points appearance game. That's like sort of saying someone's nailed on getting an assist. I'll take that every day.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just my
viewpoint. It's really good stuff. I really like that Everton run from for the end. Southampton, Wolves, Villa, Sheffield United, Bournemouth, and Norwich is how they finish up. It looks like a really nice run there. Maybe Calvert-Lewin at 4.9 potentially.
Yeah.
So moving on, Carl, then to your optimum team. I always love looking at this. It's always really interesting. Can you talk us through it? Okay,
so there's two elements to this. There's the optimum team that if we picked at the beginning of the season, and this is for how players have performed so far this season. So the teams on the left under current. So in goal, so the formation is 5-3-2, which is my favourite formation. In goal, we've got Henderson, and then TAA, Robinson, Pereira, and Chidwell, and Doherty in defence. So that's 2 Liverpool defenders and 2 Leicester defenders. And in midfield, you've got Kevin De Bruyne, Mane, and Mahrez. And up front, we got Jimenez and Ings for a total of 49.6. And if you add up all their points, you'd have had 1,509 points with 40 transfers still to play. And the current leader is on 1,584 points. Wow. This was their Friday night. So if you check now, I'm sure the leader would have advanced a few more points over the weekend.
I've just got to add in there, right, Carl? So on the very first TFF podcast, which I did on my own in like October, whenever it was now, I did a whole thing on team structure and formation. And at that time, this formation wasn't working. It was very much, there was a lot of goals. I don't know if you remember, kind of back to that time at Liverpool weren't keeping clean sheets, and Man City, weren't, and and kind of all this stuff. But I was adamant. I was saying all the values in defence, don't get expensive strikers. And if you look at that team there, it's absolutely incredible how that how it works over a season. How that 5-3-2. So they're all fullbacks, those 5 fullbacks there, really good attacking fullbacks who get those second KCs, they get the odd goal, they get the assists. De Bruyne was just a no-brainer for me at that price, season keeper 5.6, same as Trent. Mahrez, not so much, I'll hands up there. Mane, I thought was a good pick. I picked Mane over Salah at the start of the season. I wouldn't have picked Jimenez and Ings. I put my hand up there. I would have picked other strikers. I can't remember who I started with now. I'll have a think, but I think there's a lesson here for us when we're going into game week 1 next week. Even the first half of this season, there wasn't many clean sheets in the first half of this season. It was a very rare, it was a very rare thing. But even now, even with that, and if you look at that team, 5-3-2, 5 fullbacks, 3 really good midfielders, and 2 cheaper strikers. I think that's the way to go, and it's proven it there. I love it. I love it that's the formation, because that's the one I love to play. Anyway, on from my
patience as well,
and patience.
I mean, if you
absolutely.
Because if you pick, you could easily, well, maybe Henderson. I don't know how many would have gone for Henderson at the start, but he was cheap. But there could easily been teams out there with those 5 as your defenders, because they're all decent. I mean, Doty, to be honest, at the start of the season, he was getting rested a lot, wasn't he? Because him and Truro fighting for a place. But I mean, he's back in now. But I think if you go down that list down to Mane, and so swapping it, I don't know, another keeper in there, but you got 0.4 in the bank, so you could go up to a few. Jimenez, I think a lot of people will have started him. Ings is a different one, but then you could also got the flexibility of going 5-4-1. Can you play 5? No, you can't.
No,
play
you can't.
5-4-1.
This is the problem with 5-3-2 is you're kind of once you're in it, you're stuck with it, sort of thing. Yeah, but yeah, I think.
I mean,
that's really
I'm with you. And there are always budget strikers that emerge, and you know, Calvert-Lewin's one in these in the 4s, and you know, it's
I think
I like it, but it's that patience. Get your block.
It is, you're right.
I think if you had a block of 4 defenders, you're there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know at the start of the season I was advocating there were so many cheap defenders, like, you know, low 2 mils. I mean, I'd be really interested to see what you could do with that money as well, with the big hitters as well. But
But if you'd have,
imagine if you'd done that, though.
if you'd have if
you started with that team, I bet you'd be doing worse.
But
if
you'd have
made so many transfers.
If we'd have stuck with that, like 6 or 7, okay, Pereira and Chilwell, we didn't know at the start of the season that Leicester were going to be fantastic, right? So even if we didn't have Pereira and Chilwell, but we had full backs, from kind of other teams, at that time. But imagine you had a team roughly set like that, and you used more or less, you used 30 of your 40 strikers just rotating between the informed strikers, with the extra games, with the FA Cup games, all this kind of stuff. Maybe one for game week 1, guys. At the end of the season, we'll do a podcast. We'll do like a learnings one where it's right, what have we learnt this season? What are we going to go into game week 1 with? And then when we go into game week 1, we'll have to listen back to it because we always forget. We're always like, right, you've got to have the 3 most expensive strikers. You've got to have this, that, and the other. But yeah, I just sorry to keep harping on about it, but I find that so interesting in terms of formation and structure. 5-3-2 is the way to go for me. Anyway,
I love it.
Okay. I love it too. I started off with 5-3-2 and tried to stick to it most of the season, but I started off with those 2 Liverpool players, but over time people did lose faith. I'm sure I had others. If we move on to the algorithm, which is on the right hand side, there's a couple of things here. I've made a mistake in the sense that I've just realised it's an invalid formation. It's given us 5-4-1, which meant I should have rerun it and tightened up some of the constraints. A second thing I'd like to sort of say before I go through the team is the algorithm assumes that if players have reached a certain criteria, e.g. they played so many games, they played in the last at least once in the last 3 game weeks, it will assume that they'll play for the rest of the season. So when I go through this team, these players, it will automatically become clear that you would never choose this going forward. But it gives the principle, because it's mainly filled with Man United and Man City players that we've sort of talked about. Yeah. That in goal, you'd have Ederson. In defence, you'd have TAA. But apart from that, it'd be Mendy, Walker, Otamendi and Stones. And that's because the algorithm has Man City as a very good defensive unit. So I would tend to disagree with that myself.
But they are statistically, and this is the point, is statistically they're the best defence in the league, aren't they?
They're ranked right up there on the sort of metrics that I sort of take from a different website, but this season they have been poor.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's so I'd steer away from that. But the others are quite interesting. Kevin De Bruyne, Bruno, Martial that you've mentioned, Andrew. Aguero up front, and the only player to get in outside the Manchester and TAA is Sarr of Watford.
Okay, a 2.8.
Measly 2.8. So, and that I presume is just to enable all the other players to come in.
Yeah.
So
Watford's fixtures as well. Just to touch on them, they're home to Leicester this coming weekend. They've got a really nice run for a long time actually. So they've then got Burnley, Southampton, Chelsea, Norwich, Newcastle, and West Ham before they finish the season with Man City and Arsenal. But that's 2.8 for those 6 or 7 games could potentially be quite profitable if you're looking for an enabler. You know, if you've got the subs left, you know, and you're still stuck with, you know, a cheap player you don't want, or you need to downgrade, or you've got Traore who, you know, seems to have lost his place at the moment, for example. I think Sarr looks a really good option. And it'll be definitely, if Watford stay up, a player I'll be looking at his price on all formats at the start of next season. Absolutely.
If he's at that price, he'll be in.
Yeah.
If he's like 5 million, he won't be. One other thing that I'd sort of wish to mention about the algorithm as well is it doesn't look at the goalkeepers and how they're treated in the FA Cup. So when there's Henderson, he plays in the FA Cup for Sheffield United, and that is a big plus for me.
Yeah.
And I think the only other goalkeeper that I can think of, I think Schmeichel played in midweek for Leicester, but all the other teams in the FA Cup played the reserve goalkeeper. So I wouldn't pick Ederson on that basis either. I wouldn't select him coming in. They've got loads of fixtures. Like last year, I don't know what's changed this year to last year. Last year he played in every round of the cup, and that was magic. It's like put him in goal. He's playing. Everyone else was rotating. It's dreamland. This year, Man City, that they're using their reserve goalkeeper, so that would be a negative against bringing in Ederson.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. That was absolutely fantastic. Really good section. Thank you very much. We'll give you a break now, and we'll ask Luke some questions. So we've got some questions from some of our followers and listeners off Twitter. So first one, Chris Marsh. Should I still bring in a promising player like Ings and Jimenez, Jota or Doherty, even though they're out of the FA Cup? That is a really good question. Luke, what are your thoughts on really good prospects, but they're out of the FA Cup?
Right, so Jimenez potentially because of the summer's fixtures. Jota, don't get me wrong, because I've done well out of Jota in another format, but he gets subbed. But he has this habit of end of the season going mental. So if you've got a few, like Jota, yes. I think Ings seems to be off the boil now. I think it's 6 or 7 games now without a decent return. Jimenez I still like, and Doherty I like. He's basically, if Traore is playing, Doherty seems to be the second striker, even though he's down as a defender, just the way that they're playing. So I don't hate it, but I think there's other people, and I think we've just talked about sort of people like Sarr and Bruno Fernandez, which are at similar prices or lower prices. I think I'd probably look at one of those two over those guys on that list, bar maybe Jota. I do like Jimenez, though. I think he's a very good player. So if you're getting him for budget reasons and you're playing just one up front, if Jimenez is the one up front, I like that because he's cheap, nailed on, and good.
He's on penalties as well, and I say the only thing with Wolves, which does concern me a little bit, is the Europa. I'm just not sure they'll be able to keep playing, Thursday, Sunday, all the time. And they I gotta be fair to how they've managed their squad so far. They've used other players at times, something like that, Neto, Catrone, and all players like this. And that I can't remember the name of the Podence, is it? Podence, if I just made that up. I think he came on yesterday for Jota, but yeah, I think that's the only concern with Wolves as well. They're still in Europe, they may rotate, but I personally think Jota at 3.8, Doherty at 3.5, while they're still in the side, they are hot. So that'll be my answer to that one. Carl, could I ask you one? Who's got the kit? So this was after the game this afternoon. Okay, we've just seen that City are hopeless. What to do now? So United were hot too. So we've kind of spoken about United and City a lot. Yeah, well, I think we probably answered that actually. Carl, any kind of final words on what to do with our City assets at the moment?
I'll just ride them through. They're a quality team.
Yeah.
Even though they outplayed today from Man United, they outplayed them. Man United were hungrier. I don't expect that City would play as poorly as that going forward. And while they're still in the Cup, or until they've caught up with fixtures with everyone else, I'm keeping them in. It's just really, I think the question is, do you add extra City? Because I wouldn't be transferring any out.
Yeah.
Well, let's add 40 transfers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't transfer them out now. They're in and they stay in.
I'd look at that TFF planner we said earlier, the kind of game by game, day by day, and really look at that. But City score the most goals. They have the most goal involvement in terms of their players and stuff. They've had a couple of bad games. I don't think it'll be long personally before they start chucking in a couple of 4s and 5-0 personally. But Luke, question out of Chris Marsh. I'd also like to hear of players or teams you currently rate based on the eye test. It's probably a good one for you and not for Carl. So who do you like currently based on the eye test? Who are you looking at?
Is Carl blind or something? I actually think they've been picked out by Carl's algorithm. I think the two that I'm really keen on. So Bruno, I think if you haven't got him, and with the fixtures and everything, I think you've got to have Bruno from an eye test perspective. From a budget perspective, I think Sarr, I'd probably chuck in Baldock as well. I mean, I watched some of the highlights from the Sheffield United. I mean, he's dirt cheap and really good. So Baldock probably from that. And I think the only other one that I think is probably Mane. Again, I'm going off my own personal perception, but if you look at him and Salah still looks great. But Mane's cheaper and I think looked more dangerous. And when he plays, Liverpool seem to have a greater cutting edge. So probably Bruno would be my number one, Sarr number two, probably then Mane number three and Baldock number four from an eye test perspective.
Thank you, Luke. Good stuff there. Carl, so this is a question from Mike Thomas. Are people considering reducing the Liverpool players? Bare on the face, they will have won the league by the end of March at the latest. We kind of touched on this earlier as well. But yeah, I think you are. So after that Burnley early game, Carl, you're thinking of getting rid of Liverpool?
Yeah, well, yeah, come Burnley game, I'll be completely out of Liverpool. The question is of whether it happens earlier. So that for me, I prefer fixtures than the quality of players, especially when there's so few to go.
I think so I'll be keeping Trent, but purely because of his price. If Trent was 6 million, which he may be next year, because he's basically he's throwing up those kind of numbers. But for me, 4.5 million, he can score. If he keeps a clean sheet and gets an assist or two, which is
so are you telling me when Liverpool have played Burnley, that you wouldn't take Trent out and buy, say, a Man United defender when Liverpool have got Chelsea, Arsenal and Newcastle for 3 games and Man United have, say, got 4 league games in an FA Cup final?
Even better, Carl. Bruno Fernandez, exact same price.
Well, yeah, and the 2 extra fixtures.
As mad as it sounds, I probably wouldn't, because I just think that Trent is just a points machine, and he's proven it over and over again. That away game to Leicester. So on Boxing Day, I do remember Boxing Day. On Boxing night, when Liverpool played Leicester, I took Alexander-Arnold out of my FPL and Sky teams, and he got, a goal, 3 assists and a clean sheet away to Leicester. He's just that good. I think he is one of the best fantasy assets we have ever had in the Premier League, and I wouldn't take him out.
I don't disagree with that, but I'd rather have a Sheffield United player with 5 games than Trent on 3 games against Arsenal Chelsea, and Newcastle.
Okay.
Those next 2 games. That's like sort of saying 2 guaranteed assists without actually like doing anything.
Maybe.
But,
well, you raise a good point, Carl.
Different. It's all up to opinions.
It is opinion, and I'm probably slightly biased. I'm probably slightly biased in that I haven't got many transfers left. But I still think that Trent for me is the most important. Trent and De Bruyne for me are the two. They're the cornerstone of any team in TFF for me. And obviously, if they get injured or whatever, that's different, right? Yeah. But they're the cornerstone of the team for the whole season because they are involved in everything that their teams do. They get points, our everything, and it's different in TFF to other games, as I say, because they got that second key, the contribution. They're always involved, but anyway, a difference of opinion there. But yeah, we will see. We'll see.
I
Carl.
thought you were about to say. Yeah, I do appreciate your opinion, but you're wrong.
No,
I thought that's where he was heading,
wrong.
Carl.
No, he's not wrong at all. And but also, who's to say as well? And this for me is a big part of fantasy football, right? So, Man United won convincingly this afternoon. If Man City had have gubbed them 5-0 this afternoon, would we still be having this conversation about Man United players? I'm not so sure. I think it's very easy to look at a game or two and base things that are going to happen 6 weeks in the future based on what we've just seen. But again, it's opinion. I hope they do, because I'm very likely to bring in maybe Maguire, maybe Fernandez, maybe Martial. But United fans will probably pay testament. They've had a lot of false dawns of wonderful performances, followed by 4 awful ones as well. But we're going off on a tangent now. Who answered that one? Was it Carl answered that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So a question for Luke. So this is in our WhatsApp TFF chat off Tim Barry. I hid your phone number, Tim. What's a good transfer count to have for the run-in? So obviously, ignore your own team now, Luke. What do you think at the moment is the ideal transfers to have?
Well, I think if you've got more than 10, you're in great shape. I'm going to flip the question on to you, actually, Andrew. Right? So you've got 5.
Yeah.
How many more would you like to have right now?
So at the moment, with my 5, I'm very likely to be bringing in. If I was to say how I'm going to use my 5 now, I would probably guess 1 or 2 Wolves, maybe 2 Man United, and maybe Mane back is my very, very rough thought, which doesn't leave me a lot of contingency for other things, right? For other other injuries and stuff. I would probably like to have 8 or 9 now. I think if I had 8 or 9, I would be very confident of a really, really decent finish, because you can just hop on and off the fixtures. Which what you guys got? You've got 9, Carl, and you've got 11, Luke. So you're I think you're in good shape. How are you?
Yeah.
Oh, you go. Sorry.
I was just going to say. I mean, if anybody out there has got more than probably 12, right? You've got. I mean, some of the stuff we've been talking about, like the Leicester 2-for-1s, the Man City jump on, and then onto Wolves, back onto Liverpool for a bit. You've got to be going. You've got to be hitting all of them now, because I would probably say that if you've got more than 12, you've probably got too many. So you've not optimised your team over the course of the season. So I think you've got to be hitting every one of those 2-for-1s now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's all the questions on that page. We did have just 1 or 2 more on Twitter. So question from Amandeep Tatler, who I believe is having a very good season this season in a lot of formats. And it's what we haven't really looked at yet, actually. Any Chelsea players worth looking at? So, Luke, I know you mentioned Giroud earlier. Carl, first, did anything pop up in the algorithm at all in regard to Chelsea, or have you got your eye on anyone for Chelsea?
Well, that's an interesting question. I didn't watch the match today. I would say the algorithm would pick up someone like Abraham. I think he's done really well so far this year, but he's naturally injured at the moment. I've had Mount for God knows how long.
He's been great, hasn't he?
He meant to have scored a great goal today, but he may be injured. I don't sort of recall seeing anybody from the Chelsea side that sort of pop out at me. Reece James as a cheap player. But to be honest, if someone said to me, named 11 Chelsea players that started today, I would find it quite difficult.
Okay.
Because without sort of seeing the game, but because they sort of interchange.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just having a quick look at what I've got on my spreadsheets in front of me, and there's no Chelsea players except for Abraham. He pops up. I can see him there. But no.
So 2, right? So if Alonso's nailed again, because he's been on fine form, I think we all know every person who's played fantasy has loved Alonso at some point in the last 2 or 3 years. Gilmour today was brilliant. So he smashed it against Liverpool, albeit not 100% their first team, and he was man of the match again today on Sky. 2.2 midfielder.
Oh.
Right? If he's nailed for Chelsea, I think that's exceptional value. So I'm not saying get him today, but if he starts the next game, I would say that kid's in, because that's 2 man of the matches he's had in 2 games against good teams. So yeah, he could be one. Come to the Picks game, somebody might get him, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, watch this space. I'd probably give him 2 more games, but if he starts the next 2 games and plays like he has, 2.2 million. I don't care what position he is. That's phenomenal value.
Yeah, agree. Agree with Reece James as well. I think I actually picked Reece James in last month's players picks. I think he's 2.3 million. I think he's playing every game now. He's on some set pieces.
Didn't start today though.
He didn't start today.
No, he came on. He came on at 60 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, because Alonso played at left back, didn't he? Today, yeah. But Alonso, Mount, Reece James, Gilmour, probably the ones to look for Chelsea. And that concludes the questions. So the last thing we're going to do are player picks. I've already apologised to Carl and Luke. I haven't added up the score from the last one, so I'll do better this next season. I promise. I've asked Carl if he can do some kind of make it some kind of funky tool where it auto adds up the picks we use for next month, and next season as well. We'll try and get all our listeners involved as well in a way, to be able to interact a bit more in terms of this player pick challenge. But Carl, if I come to you first, then a premium player, so someone over 5 million who is going to score the most points you feel next month, then a mid-value player between 3 and 5 million, and then a sub 3 million player as a budget. Could I come to you first for your 3 picks?
Okay. Over the next month, until the next
podcast. So,
well, if we're starting from today,
yes,
I will go for Aguero in as my expensive pick.
Yeah.
What's the price for mid? Sorry,
3 to 5 million.
3 to 5. I'll go for Bruno.
Yeah, good shout. Swine.
And for 3 million, I'll go for Sarr.
Yeah, good shout. Yeah, good. You've had some good ones there, Carl. Luke, do you want to go next?
It's you next. I went first last time.
Oh, Christ, okay. I haven't prepared for this, so I'm doing a little bit off.
That's right, neither have I, mate. We can alternate if you want.
Okay, so for the premium, I will go for... Oh, God. It's boring to go for someone like Mane. I'll go for Mane for the premium. For the mid price one, I'll go for Martial. And for the cheap one, I would have wanted Sarr for sure. I'll continue with Baldock because he's been in my team. He's been doing me proud, so I'll continue with Baldock as my sub 3 million player. On to you, Luke, with no prep.
Right. Well, I'll take Salah. Don't quite understand how I've managed to get him. I'm just going to take Trent, and I'm going to back the team. So I'll take Trent as the mid-price 1, and then I'm under 3. Right, is it 3 and under?
Under 3, but nice try.
Under 3. Yeah. Do you know what? I'm going to just take a punt on that Chelsea kid. I'll have him. Can't even remember what was his name. Was it Gilmore?
Billy Gilmore, I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, Billy Gilmore.
Yeah.
2.2.
Let's have a real punt on him. The punt seemed to come off for me in this game. So
back yourself. Excellent. Okay. So a bumper episode there, gents. Thank you very much. We've covered an awful lot there. We haven't done one for a few weeks, so it's really good to get in with so much information. Thank you to guys, obviously, for your brilliant analysis, insight, ideas, and suggestions. Absolutely fantastic stuff. And we will do it'll be our last one in terms of the season being on. We'll do a next month in April. To prepare for the run-in for the final few games. So we will do a final one in April before we do a kind of a retrospective one then at the end of the season as we head into the summer. If I can drag Luke and Carl off their deck chairs from wherever they are, wherever they like to spend their time after the fantasy season is over. Luke, where can we find you if anyone wants to get hold of you for anything?
On Twitter is probably the easiest one. So at FPL_equation on Twitter. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way. I'm on Facebook and a few WhatsApp groups as well. But yeah, that's probably a good start. Yeah.
Okay, and yourself, Carl?
Yeah, Darkest Jungle on Twitter, and also on the Fantasy Football Hub as well. I write a couple of articles a week, so you can catch me up on there if you so desire.
Excellent. And my Twitter handle is at Fergie222. So this podcast and video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel, and is also available in all major podcast libraries, including iTunes, SoundCloud and Spotify. If you like what you hear, please like, share, subscribe and retweet. It all helps us get the word out, and make sure you don't miss anything. All comments and feedback are very, very welcome. The Hub Twitter handle is at FFH_HQ. Please follow and feel free to ask any questions of us at any time. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you will find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta stats, team reveals, and much, much more, which can be used for TFF, Sky and FPL. We have got you covered, completely covered for everything Telegraph Fantasy Football. You don't need to go anywhere else. So we have the TFF Planner, which I demoed earlier. Apologies for the error there with the Bournemouth and Wolves game, but it breaks down, as you can see, it breaks down all the games by game day and by match to maximise your transfers. And Carl's algorithm article every week shares in detail the best statistical team for the next 6 weeks. It is a fantastic read, so make sure you go to the Hub and look for that. I write a weekly article which covers TFF, so I discuss all my plans and my every move. You can get that by signing up to Standard Fantasy Football Hub membership. Use code Andrew10, that's Andrew10 for a 10% discount if you want to get onto that. And if you fancy a 7-day free Hub membership trial, just go onto the website and sign up for free for 7 days. We also have our TFF WhatsApp chat group, which is available to premium Hub members. Again, use code Andrew10 if you're interested in that. And finally, don't forget to catch the Hub's weekly FPL podcast and Sky podcast. So if you play FPL or Sky, we do weekly podcasts for both of those. All details are on the website or on my Twitter handle or on the Hub's Twitter handle. The Hub's FPL Saturday live stream is also back next Saturday at 10 to 3, where we talk you through the 3 p.m. Premier League action as it happens from an FPL perspective. So join us for that, for the live action. Our FPL channel link is in the description below. In the meantime, we hope you have a great month in TFF. We hope you've enjoyed. Best of luck to everyone for the next month. And we bid you thank you and good night. Good night all.